Good afternoon. I'm fascinated by street names and their origin, and I've done a series of videos about Belfast street names already. This is Newtownards at the head of Strangford Lough, and just south of Newtownards, if I expand Google Maps here, we've got Newtownards Airport, or a flying club, Ulster Flying Club, just in this section here that I'm highlighting, or the wee arrows on. And most people aren't aware that whenever the Belfast Blitz happened on one of the nights of the Belfast Blitz, Newtownards Airport was also targeted along with Belfast, because Squadron 231 was based there. Now, I'm not sure what kind of planes they were, but they were based there, and the German Luftwaffe sent some of their planes in the direction of Newtownards, and the airport was hit. So that was on the 15th of April 1941, and unfortunately a lot of there was a lot of young soldiers on guard duty and in barracks in huts at the side of the airport, and quite a number were badly injured and quite a number were killed. 13 in all were killed. They were from the battalion of the Royal Enniskillen Fusiliers, and they're all young. Well, most of them were young fellas. They were too young to actually go into forward service units, so they were doing guard duty until they reached an age. So there was 13 died in all. Two of them were 18-year-olds, and two of them were 17-year-olds, and there was one 16-year-old. And, you know, that's not widely known. So it is appropriate that across the road from the airport we have the West Winds Estate, and whenever it was built, I presume it was built in the late 60s, early 70s, the builders, or whoever, the town council, decided to name most of the streets after World War II era aeroplanes, and most of these aeroplanes were on active duty during the Second World War. And I'm just totally amazed by this, the number of streets that are named after World War II era planes. So we've got, and there's a whole list of them here, and I think there's about 16 names. There's Blenheim, Lancaster, Canberra, Ulster, Valletta, Lysander, Dakota, Shackleton, Sunderland, Bristol, Stirling, Halifax, Anson, Hampden, and Beaufort and Catalina. And they're all street names or avenue names or drives or whatever. But they're all in the West Winds Estate. And that's very fitting. I just am amazed that there's just so many. I don't think there's any other estate or town up and down the length of the UK has got street names, 16 associated main streets named after World War II era aeroplanes. So I'm going to have a wee look at them now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the various aircraft street names and get up a picture, hopefully, of every aircraft that is listed in the street names of the West Winds Estate. First of all, this is the Bristol Blenheim. Bristol was the manufacturer. This is a 2-engined light to medium bomber, and it could be used as a heavy fighter. This is an Avro Lancaster, and I remember making Airfix kit models, and me and my brother would have hung these on wee bits of thread from the ceiling, and you know, you made up, spent hours and hours making these up and building them and then painting them, and then you hung them from the ceiling. So it was a heavy bomber. It was a 4-engined bomber made by Avro. This is a Canberra. It was designed and built in the last stages of the war. It was able to fly very high and very fast, and it had Rolls-Royce engines, and today apparently it's still being used because it hasn't been bettered. It's still being used by NASA, would you believe, for high flying, and that's, what are we talking, 70 years later? This here is an Oster. I've never heard of an Oster before. It flew from 1933 right through to 1961. It was called a Taylorcraft Oster, and it was a liaison observation plane. It was a sort of a spotter plane used for directing artillery on the ground. This is a Vickers Valletta. It was manufactured in the late 1940s and flew from 1947. It was used as a transport plane. This is a Westlands Lysander, and I find this aircraft rather fascinating. It was manufactured and used from 1938. It was an army cooperation or liaison plane, and it was so useful because it didn't require a great big long runway. It could get in under cover of darkness and land on a short runway and take off very, very quickly. Used for recovering agents and what have you, clandestine operations in the Second World War. And it was nicknamed the Lizzie, and it was called Lysander because he was a Spartan admiral. This is a Douglas Skytrain Dakota, and I remember making Airfix models of this too. This boyo was used for parachuting troops into France and Germany in the Second World War. It was a military transporter. It is reckoned that these Dakotas dropped upwards of 50,000 troops in the days after D-Day. It was nicknamed the Goonie Bird, and it was used right up to 2012 whenever it was being used for civilian use. This is an Avro Shackleton, obviously named after Shackleton, the explorer, the Arctic explorer, and it was used mainly on anti-submarine duties during the Cold War. Came into operation in 1949, a long-range maritime patrol aircraft. This is a Sunderland Shorts flying boat, quite a substantial size of aircraft, and these were based at Enniskillen along with the Catalinas, and manufactured in Belfast by Short Brothers, manufactured from 1937, and they were a patrol boat and bomber, and a major participant in the Battle of the Atlantic, the hunt for German wolf packs, the submarines, and also in the hunt for the Bismarck. And this is a Bristol biplane used in World War I. It was used for reconnaissance work and as a spotter, 1916 to 1930, and it was called a Bristol fighter. It was a two-seater biplane, and Bristol actually was the manufacturer, and Bristol manufactured a whole series of aeroplanes, First World War and Second World War, but I chose this one because it looks good, and I want to remember the men who fought in World War I as well as World War II. And this is a Shorts Stirling bomber. It's a heavy bomber, and this was one of the first 4-engined bombers to come into the war on the Allied side. It was manufactured in Belfast, Short Brothers, and it was particularly good to fly. It was easy to handle, and it could even outturn the German fighters, night fighters. It was superseded by the Halifax and the Lancaster in 1943, and it became a glider tug plane, and it mined German ports, and it was used as a supply aircraft. This is the Hadley Page Halifax bomber. Again, 4 engines. Used Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. There were thousands of these built, and they were a strategic bomber, and they were particularly used at night. They were used from 1940 onwards. 1,833 of these aircraft were lost over France and Germany on bombing raids. So they had a high casualty rate, and there must have been a crew in these, maybe about 6 or 8 guys. So you can imagine the numbers of guys that were lost on these planes because they were so widely used. This is an airplane I didn't know that existed. I never came across it in kit form to build. It's an Anson, and it was a multi-purpose aircraft from the Second World War. 1936 onwards, these were produced twin-engined, and it gave way to being used more as an air trainer and a spotter rather than frontline battle craft. This is a Hadley Page twin-engined Hampden Mark I. What can I tell you about it? It was a medium bomber used from 1938 through to 1943. It was called the Flying Suitcase because it was very cramped conditions for the crew. It was used extensively for early bombing raids on Germany. We're talking about Berlin, we're talking about Cologne. But it was superseded by the bigger 4-engined planes that could fly higher and travel faster and hold more bombs. These are Royal Air Force Bristol Beauforts, again manufactured by Bristol Company. Twin-engined torpedo bomber, anti-submariner, lead mines. It was used by the Fleet Air Arm and the RAF, and it was also used as a trainer. Saw considerable action in the Mediterranean in around Malta and Egypt, and it was used to disrupt the German supply route coming from Italy over to Egypt, etc., or North Africa. And it was adapted in later life to become the Beaufort fighter, which was very, very successful. This is the American-made Catalina, and again, like the Sunderland flying boat, it was based in and around Lough Neagh and Lough Erne and round Enniskillen, and its main duties were out into the Atlantic, although it was widely used in other places during the Second World War. 1936 onwards, it was one of the most widely used aircraft in World War II, used in every theatre of war and every branch of the United States Armed Forces. It was an anti-submariner, it was a patroller, it was a bomber, it was a convoy escort, it was a cargo transport, it was and one of its big uses was as a search and a rescue aircraft, because it could land and pick up survivors and what have you. And even today, it's being used throughout the world as a water bomber. Forest fires, and you get a Catalina to drench the area in water. It's an aerial firefighter plane, and it's still in use. Well folks, that's my wee video roundup of the street names in the West Winds Estate, and you can see from the map there, I'll scroll down, there's Blenheim, and there's Beaufort over on the left hand side, there's Shackleton Walk, Dakota Avenue, Bristol Park, Anson Gardens, Catalina Gardens, on round, Stirling Avenue. Now there's a Stirling Avenue over at Cregagh Road as well. Sunderland Park. Did I say Shackleton? I can't remember. Lancaster Walk, Valletta Park, Lysander Park, Oster Park, Canberra Gardens. Have I missed any out? I've got the code, folks. You might realise that the old voice isn't as good as it should be. Probably have missed one or two out there. Oh. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I was just fascinated by all these street names named after World War II era aeroplanes, and I was fascinated actually to discover the names of those aeroplanes that I didn't know, and to find out a few facts about them. Okay, see you soon.